Hello, I'm Jerry Stewart with another episode of Common Sense. Now, in my last episode, if you'll recall, I gave you a wonderful Christmas story of this famous song, I'll Be Home for Christmas, and how it was such a popular song in the early 1940s here in America, and popular perhaps for not a great reason. It was as if all of our soldiers and those serving overseas in the war, it's like they were throwing up a prayer that said, I'll be home for Christmas, if only in my dreams. If you didn't get a chance to see that, you should go back and hear the song, contemplate the story, and realize that there are people today, men and women, brave Americans, this day, this Christmas season, that are serving away from their homes. And if they had one wish, it would be this: please let me be home with my family and friends for Christmas. After I finished that episode, I sort of gave you a bit of a teaser that I was going to be talking about this matter of Santa Claus. Santa Claus real, or is he just a nice little children's ideal and a fun way to spend Christmas? Well, as I mentioned last week, and I'll mention again today, Saint Nicholas, Santa Claus, was very, very real. He's a real person. Let me tell you the story. In the early 300 AD, there was a young boy who was born. His name was Nicholas. And Nicholas had wonderful parents. They were wealthy, and they were very kind and generous. Sadly, Nicholas's mom and dad died of an epidemic when he was still a very, very young boy. But the good news was that his mom and dad believed in Jesus Christ. And before they died, they taught Nicholas about Jesus being the Savior of the world. They also taught him in the spirit of Christ to be generous, to be unselfish, and to have a heart for others. So he ended up growing up in a town in Turkey called Myrna, and he grew up to be a fine, fine, generous man. And he loved to help people. So interestingly enough, and you're going to be noticing some of the characteristics that we know today of Santa Claus that were first born in Nicholas. Nicholas loved, according to stories, he loved to disguise himself and give gifts to children. He loved to find the needy and help them. But the thing that was consistent was that he did not want anyone to know that he was doing it. He wanted to be anonymous. In fact, there's one wonderful story about a father who had 3 daughters. And one of the daughters had the opportunity to become married. Well, back in those days, when your daughter became married or became to be married, you were to give a dowry to the groom, your son-in-law to be. Now, a dowry is like land or cattle or something to help you sort of get your life started. And the way it worked back then is if a young girl did not have a dowry to be given, she couldn't get married. Well, Nicholas knew about this young girl, and he wanted to help her, but he did not want her or her father to know that he was the one that did it. So he had this idea that he was going to put some gold in a bag, and that late one night when everyone was asleep, he would open the window and throw in this bag of gold. Now, Back in those days, there were no washing machines and dryers. Everyone had to wash their clothes, by hand. And then and people would wear socks. Women would wear stockings. And if they wanted their stockings to dry overnight, they would hang them on the mantle above the fireplace. Think about that for a minute. Stockings hanging on the mantle above the fireplace to get dry. Well, that night when Nicholas decided to, help the girl out with the bag of gold, he waited until everyone was asleep, and he went to the window and he opened the window and he tossed in this bag of gold. And guess where the bag landed? It went right into the stocking that was hanging on the mantle. So that next morning, when the girl got up to get her stockings, her dried stockings, she looks inside the stockings and there is a bag of gold. Well, Nicholas continued to do these acts of kindness all through his city. And he one day finally was found out. Someone discovered that he was the generous giver. And he said, "Oh, please, 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 don't let anyone know. I want to remain anonymous." Well, as you know, things don't stay under wrap very long. And soon everyone knew that he was the generous giver. In fact, as I mentioned early on, he was a very wealthy man. And believe it or not, as he grew older and older, he had given away everything. And he no longer had a lot of money. So then he would go out and literally beg for money to give to others. He was an amazing, amazing man in the picture of Jesus Christ giving everything that he had to give. Well, about 314 AD, according to what I've read, he passed away. By that time, he had quite a reputation, and the Catholic Church made him a saint. So guess what? He became, you've got it, he became Saint Nicholas. And to this day, he is still recognized as a saint. In fact, according to my reading, aside from the apostles, there's more churches in Europe under the name of Saint Nicholas than any other name. Very, very popular. So when we think about Saint Nicholas, and of course the way we end up with Santa Claus is that in many countries the name gets changed a little bit. So here in our America we call him Santa Claus. And we have this thing called Christmas. Now, some try to say Christmas is not about the Christ child, but Christmas was the word that was used by the early Catholic Church when they had a Mass for Christ, a Christ Mass. And to try to get somehow the baby Jesus out of Christmas, just not possible. Now, you might be saying, now hold on a second. Okay, he was a kind man. He secretly gave gifts, crawling down a chimney, whatever you might do, to be able to place gifts. He put gifts in stockings, yes. He came at night when everyone was asleep, yes. And most likely, he gave gifts to those who had been kind and good themselves. Sounds a lot like the characteristics that we have today of Santa Claus, and rightly so. Saint Nick is Santa Claus. Now, how did he get to be this, riding a sleigh and having 8 reindeer? How did he get to do that? Well, in 1822, there was a man by the name of Clement Moore One night his daughter was very, very deathly ill on Christmas Eve. And she was asked what she wanted. And she said to her father, who loved to write poems, she said, "Would you please write me a poem?" So he frantically, on this Christmas Eve night, 1822, he wrote a poem for his daughter. And the name of the poem was A Visit from Saint Nick. And in that poem, he talked about that the way Santa got around was this sleigh and these flying reindeer, and they pulled him around across the country to deliver the gifts. So we don't know that poem today as A Visit from St. Nick, but we all very well know the poem, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." That's how St. Nicholas got his reindeer, just by a simple poem by this gentleman, Clement Moore. Now you say, but hold it a second, where did he get the red suit and the belly that rolls around like a bowl of jelly? How did that all happen? Well, in the mid-1800s, there was a cartoon artist. His name was Thomas Nast. And Thomas Nast liked to draw cartoons. Well, he was the one that drew the cartoon that gave us the picture of who we know today as Uncle Sam. Look sometime at the picture of Uncle Sam and notice he looks a lot like Abraham Lincoln. Yeah. Well, Thomas Nast did a caricature, a cartoon picture that he drew of St. Nicholas, wearing a red suit with white trim, the big white beard, and the belly that rolled around like a bowl full of jelly. So it is true that legend can come and things can be added along the way, but know this. Know that all of those years back, hundreds upon hundreds of years ago, there was a man, Saint Nicholas. He was sainted by the church for being such a generous and kind man. And Nicholas was a Christian. Nicholas believed in Jesus Christ. And he was doing his best to be the picture of Jesus by being generous, by being unselfish, and by giving everything that he had. Great story, huh? Next time, I'm going to tell you the story of a wise man that may have also been very much following the star to Bethlehem. And I'll tell you the story of this man, Artaban. And it's a part of the Christmas story that is legend, but it's a wonderful addition to how the wise men happened to come to Bethlehem. Do you like these stories? I love when you write back to me and say, yeah, you know, that was really good. I really like it. And I get ideas from people, things that I did not know. Would you please do that for me if you like this? Also, too, it probably doesn't seem like a much thinking about it, but if I get enough subscribers, then I get a different kind of a channel here on YouTube, which makes it much, much easier for you to get in and out of my features. And it also gives me much more exposure to people who don't know anything about what I'm doing. And honestly, I believe that this is like a ministry, if you will. I believe that people need to know stories that will lift them up and make them stronger and give them hope. That's what I want to do, okay? So if you haven't subscribed, please do. There's a box right here on the screen. Just click on that and please subscribe. Thanks so much for following. Thanks so much for watching this. I'll watch for your reply. And until next time, I'm Jerry Stewart saying, God bless you. Bye-bye.